Hey there, this is Anna Maria Helt at Osada Natural Health, and today I'm throwing yet another mushroom video at you, but with a different perspective. Today we're going to talk about mushroom aromatics and specifically boletes. So I like to call this topic of mushroom aromatics mushroomatherapy. So bolete perfume, believe it or not, it's a thing and it's actually pretty cool. So I use boletes and actually other local mushrooms in perfume blends. I play with boletes, I play with artist conch, which is Ganoderma applanatum. I like red-belted conch, which is Fomitopsis schrenkii, where I live, and another conch called aspen bracket or Felinus tremulae. So you can actually, so this isn't that outlandish of a topic actually. You can buy a Bolete Absolute commercially online. It seems like mostly European companies are offering it, but you can find it online. So an Absolute's a little different than an essential oil. An Absolute is solvent extracted. There's multiple processes that it goes through to result in a really complex aromatic, whereas say an essential oil is either distilled or expeller pressed from a botanical. But regardless, absolutes are really popular in perfumery. You just need to be aware that sometimes there's some solvent carryover into the absolute and hence a potential for sensitivity. But when I'm working with a perfume, the amount of absolute I'm using is fairly small. Anyway, I digress. Back to boletes. So Boletus edulis, otherwise known as porcini or ceps, is available commercially as an absolute. So here's the fungus in question, Boletus edulis, the lovely and delicious and good smelling Boletus edulis, with edulis meaning edible. Now, I've told you that there are commercially available bolete absolutes made from this mushroom. There are also commercially available perfumes that feature this mushroom. So there is a perfume, a natural perfume called Ceps and Tuberose by the wonderful Mandy Aftel, who's a very experienced natural perfumer. This little 2-ounce or 2 milliliter bottle, I should say, will set you back about $55. But the combination of tuberose and ceps or bolete is absolutely divine. So you may be asking right now, what does a bolete smell like if you're not familiar with boletes? Well, it smells like mushroom, kind of that characteristic fungusy scent. Boletes will smell earthy. Boletes will smell kind of fermenty. There are balsamic notes in boletes that might be noticeable, and balsamic notes are those that are kind of warm. They can be sweet, rich, sort of resinous, oily. Some balsamic notes are kind of animally, so this is getting into some weird perfume terminology. Boletes may have kind of a grassy or hay note to them. There might even be some floral notes if you're creative enough when you're smelling your boletes. Now, to be clear, when we're talking about edible boletes like Boletus edulis or King Bolete, the scent is going to change dramatically upon cooking it. So if you roast a bolete or dry saute a bolete and start to brown it, it's going to still be heavily mushroom scented, bolete scented, but it's going to also be more almost like, I don't know that you can call umami a scent, but like the umami flavor of boletes when you roast them also comes out in the scent. It's a really rich, yummy, foodie kind of scent when you roast boletes. I'm talking about working more with raw boletes here in perfumery. Now, again, mushrooms in general, well, not all mushrooms, but a lot of mushrooms can lend kind of a groundy, earthy note to perfume blends. It's not true for every mushroom. There are mushrooms that smell like florals or like citrus, but for boletes, we're, a kind of a mushroomy, groundy note to perfumery. A lot of us that do perfumery would call these grounding, earthy notes a base note. But technically speaking, molecularly speaking, in perfumery, base notes are those aromatics that have heavier, bigger molecules in them that are slower to evaporate. And they're kind of the last thing you smell in a perfume blend because different aromatics are different molecular sizes, which determine their evaporation rate. Base notes being the big ones, top notes being the smallest molecules, things like esters that we tend to notice first in a perfume. Say when somebody walks by, that's the first thing we notice. But at the end of the day, after you've put your natural perfume on, it's those base notes you're noticing. And I'm getting into this because boletes, even though the scent can seem heavier and more like a base note, molecularly speaking, a lot of what's in boletes in terms of aromatics are not big base notes. They're not big sesquiterpene molecules, for instance. Boletes have a lot of relatively small-sized scent molecules. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. So anyway, I'm nerding out on this for you perfume folks that are like, wait a minute, it's a base note in blending, but it's not a base note in blending. Molecularly speaking, a lot of, like I said, a lot of the chemicals in boletes are smaller molecular weight, more similar to what we would call a top note in perfumery, but the scent itself is earthy and kind of grounding. So what makes a bolete smell like it smells like? So what makes a bolete smell like it smells like? Well, it turns out a lot of things. And in terms of Boletus edulis specifically, there's been a little bit of chemistry done looking into its aromatics. One of the most well-known fungal aromatics in King Bolete is something called octanol, or octan-3-ol. The 3 is where the alcohol part of this molecule is, that OH you see there. But octanol is the quick and easy way to refer to this chemical. And this is a ubiquitous aromatic found in mushrooms and other types of fungi. It's also found on our skin. We make it. A lot of things in the plant kingdom also make this. This is a sedating molecule. So if you've ever walked through the woods and noticed a fungusy aroma and maybe noticed that you're relaxed, part of that relaxation, of course, comes from walking in the woods, but part of it is coming from inhaling octanol and other relaxing aromatics, maybe things like pinene from the conifer trees you might be walking by. So octanol, depending on the enantiomer, say that 5 times fast, the structure of it basically, it can exist in 2 different forms. It might smell hardcore fungusy or mushroomy, or it might smell kind of grassy or hay-like, and that is one of the potential contributing factors to the grassy or hay-like notes that have been observed with boletes. But these next 2 aromatics, hexanol and hexanal, also can contribute to that sort of fresh cut grass aroma. So octanol, going back to that, is what's known as a, quote, C8 compound. And the C8 means carbon and the number 8 carbons in this molecule. It's an 8 carbon molecule, and like I said, found in lots of mushrooms. It is a linoleic acid breakdown product, a fatty acid breakdown product. Octanol. Hexanol is also a linoleic acid breakdown product, a fatty acid breakdown product. I can't seem to speak today. The OL at the end of these names indicates that these chemicals are alcohol, by the way. You'll see little OHs there. Those are alcohol groups. So hexanol, as opposed to octanol, is strongly fruity scented. Fresh cut grass is a descriptor, apple is a descriptor, kind of herbal, green, oily, wine-like. Some people detect even sort of an animal goaty note with hexanol, all from this one chemical. So this is another major component of bolete aromatics. And then hexanal at the bottom here, this is an aldehyde. So in general, when you see an Al at the end of a chemical name like this, there's an aldehyde group there. And so you'll see an O, which is an oxygen, and an H, which is a hydrogen like you do in alcohols, but they're arranged differently, structurally speaking. They're no longer together here. So this is an aldehyde. Aldehydes often smell fruity, and this one indeed does smell fruity. It is related chemically to these other components. It is yet another linoleic acid breakdown product or metabolite, a fatty acid breakdown product or metabolite. But these are only just a few of the things that make King Bolete smell like they smell. So here we go with a little more chemistry. Bear with me here. Benzaldehyde and anisaldehyde. So here we are with aldehydes again. These are other aromatics that make bolete smell like they smell. Now the chemical names here are a bit of a different format than the ones I was just talking about. That's why you're not seeing the AL at the end of the name. I'm not going to get into that. Benzaldehyde, though, has a characteristic almondy or kind of maraschino cherry scent to it. It's found in many other mushrooms, including certain forms of agaricus. anisaldehyde instead has an aniseed scent to it. So these are two other things found in king boletes. Some other aromatics include eugenol and vanillin. These are so-called terpenoid compounds. Eugenol is an alcohol. You can see that HO stuck to it there. This is also very prevalent in things like cloves and cinnamon and many other plant aromatics. Tulsi is another plant that's high in eugenol. It has a very characteristic balsamic scent. And clove oil is almost entirely eugenol. So if you want to know what eugenol itself smells like, go smell some cloves. Vanillin, as I said, is another terpenoid here. This is, not surprisingly, found in vanilla. And synthetic vanillin is what is basically artificial vanilla flavor. So while vanillin is naturally found in vanilla, artificial vanilla flavor tends to be synthesized vanillin, whereas true vanilla extract has other constituents in it as well. But anyway, there's a little bit of vanillin in boletes as well. And in fact, vanillin, believe it or not, is chemically derived from eugenol, metabolically speaking. It's a metabolic child of eugenol. It takes about 4 chemical steps to turn eugenol here on the top into vanillin on the bottom. Now, some other aromatics in boletes. I promise we won't do much more chemistry after this. This is for the chemistry and perfumery nerds here. So there's something called acrylic acid, also found in boletes. And this is, you can see, a pretty small molecule, relatively speaking. Its other name is 2-propanoic acid. And this has kind of a tart, acrid scent to it. And then at the bottom is valeric acid, which is also in valerian. That's where the name comes from. And this may also be something that contributes to the sedating scent of some mushrooms after distillation or during distillation. The scent of valeric acid is kind of sweet, to some extent musty, rancid. There's a tobacco note to it. Some folks describe it as cheesy, and you may recognize some of this if you're familiar with the scent of valerian. And then last but not least, one of the other notable aromatics in king bolete has the lovely name of putrescine. Great name there, yeah? This is another fatty acid derivative, another fatty acid breakdown product, and lovely enough, this is also found in decaying corpses as the fats decompose. So if that doesn't make you want to use boletes in perfumery, I don't know what will. Actually, this is not a really major note in boletes. Boletes don't tend to smell like corpses, but it is there. It is in there. Now, for perfumery myself, I use what's locally available. So I use the Rocky Mountain red-topped bolete, or the Rocky Mountain red, Boletus rubriceps, a really beautiful bolete that's pretty closely related to Boletus edulis. Now, it's likely that some of the aromatic chemistry is different between these two species, because we know that chemistry can even vary within one species depending on where it's grown. But this is Boletus rubriceps, our beautiful Rocky Mountain red bolete. This is the one that I use in perfumery. And so there are a handful of ways that I'll incorporate mushrooms into perfumes. Or I should back up and say there are a handful of ways that I prepare aromatics from the mushrooms before using them in blends. So one way is to make what's known as a hydrosol. So this is a distillation technique that you can simply do on your stovetop. It's a little bit hands-on and can be a bit of a pain, but simplistic at the same time. So it's a stovetop distillation that anybody can do who has a pan and a bowl and some ice and a lid for the pan. I'll get into how to do stovetop distillation in another video. So this will capture some of the aromatics out of a mushroom or out of whatever you happen to be distilling. And then you can take the hydrosol, that scented, that aromatic water that results from the distillation, and combine it with other hydrosols. Say you made a lavender hydrosol or some other plant-based hydrosol. You can combine it with your mushroom one. Now, another way that I like to capture the aromatics out of a fungus is to infuse that fungus into an oil. I like to use jojoba oil because it doesn't go rancid. Technically speaking, it's a wax. Molecularly, it's a little bit different than an oil, and so it won't go rancid, but it is expensive. But I like it. because it's stable and it doesn't really have much of a scent. So you're really smelling the aromatics that you're extracting into the oil. So you're extracting fat-soluble molecules, including the volatile oils, what we would call an essential oil after distillation, from the mushroom or the plant into the jojoba or whatever other oil you're using. You could use something like almond oil or maybe expeller pressed grapeseed oil. You want something that doesn't have too much of a scent with respect to the oil. Now this is going to be a more complex aroma than the hydrosol, and this can be blended then with other infused oils, a great way to do your perfumery. Or you could even use that jojoba oil infused with, in this case, bolete, and then add essential oils to it, whether it's from different flowers or conifers or whatever you want, and make your perfume blend that way. Now, I don't generally collect enough wild mushrooms or wild plants to make something like an absolute or to distill pure essential oil from it. You need lots and lots and lots of starting material to do that, and I'm just not set up to do that. So I make hydrosols, like I said, or these infused oils, and they work great. Now, to be clear, boletes and other of the fungi I mentioned, artist conch and such, they might not smell wonderful as a perfume by themselves. Like for any of you familiar with aromatics, you know, a lot of us won't wear a really heavy, dirty smelling base note, say galbanum, as a straight perfume by itself, but it's absolutely amazing in a good blend with other aromatics. So the same thing with these mushrooms. By themselves, you know, be kind of a funky perfume, but they're really divine when you blend them with other botanicals. And they also give, you know, with some of the scents we're talking about here, kind of a nice grounding note to a perfume, an earthy note, a fungusy note to a perfume. In terms of boletes and what I blend with it, I like to blend heavy-duty florals with it. So I mentioned earlier Mandy Aftel's tuberose and seps blend. So tuberose is this amazingly sweet, creamy, rich floral scent. So things like that, and rose absolute. Maybe ylang ylang, a good quality ylang ylang, or geranium. People often call this rose geranium. These heavy duty florals go really well with bolete. And I also like conifer oils or conifer aromatics with boletes, whether we're talking about fir or different kinds of pine or even juniper berries. I like citrus with boletes. I even like vanilla absolute with boletes. And it's interesting because, as I already talked about, there's a little bit of vanillin already in boletes. And so all of these things combined together in proper ratios can smell absolutely incredible. And what I mean by a proper ratio is whatever smells good to you or to the client that you're blending for. So there you go, bolete perfume. Stay tuned for the next weird bolete video where I'm going to get into boletes in cocktails and mocktails. Thanks for watching.